What exactly is Memento? You call it a movement online. I'm curious what that means. Go ahead, just however you deem appropriate. Can you describe to us what this project you're working on is?
Yeah, so it's kind of a marriage of two things. One, it's looking in the rearview mirror, and the word memento means remembrance. And one of the points is that there's a lot of things that we have forgotten that Christians do that used to be very second nature, used to be built into the liturgical forms and kind of normal daily like household practices, particularly with men. And we've got a great history of this. We've had Kinney on, Pastor Ian Kinney, who's, just done a ton of research for about a decade into this of, during different times in history, what are they doing in the 4th century? What are they doing in the 2nd century? What does the Didache say? What does Luther say about these kind of spiritual practices is a name you can use for it. Christian habits is another name that might be a little bit more approachable. And what you find when you look in the rearview mirror is that the Christian life had a lot more of a robust form for various reasons than it does today. So that's one aspect of it, is to look back and say, what was something that was normal and kind of ascribed and expected for a Christian man in particular, because this one's geared towards men. We're exploring a woman's version perhaps towards the end of the year. But what was kind of normal that we've forgotten, and we've lost the muscle memory for how the Christian life takes form. So you kind of take that as a historical practice, and then you look at today and you say, well, what's some of the issues with masculinity? And there's a lot you could say there. In some ways, masculinity has been under attack for a couple decades, with feminism and other movements. So it's kind of in some ways castrated men in different areas, and that's caused two things. One, it's caused an effeminization, but on the other side, it's caused a confusion when people try to latch back onto the masculinities. Toxic masculinity, that phrase has been very much abused, but there are forms of toxic masculinity that are pretty obvious. Andrew Tate's an example of that. But why do millions of people, flock to Andrew Tate? Because they've kind of been brutalized by feminism. Then Andrew Tate comes with kind of a bold masculinity that's obviously void of almost any semblance of what Christian masculinity would be. So it creates kind of a confusion. So Memento's aim is to say, okay, the church has spoken about what the Christian calling and how that's ascribed to masculinity. We've got a ton of history here of how that's been used. And we have particular challenges today with that kind of cultural, perspective. But then also you can just watch the way that plays out in normal people's lives. And that's where I can just reflect on myself and, any of the good guys that are around me. And you struggle with sloth, for instance, because there's so much comfort and so much distraction, compared to what my grandfather would have had, for instance, right? With phones, technology, video games, screens, all this kind of stuff that just pulls you away from kind of a focused life. That's going to lead to things like lust. How many fast food restaurants do you pass, on a normal basis? When's the last time someone's gone 6 hours without eating food? People say, I'm starving, So all these kind of things are just kind of unique issues of today. And the focus of Memento is to say, we actually have a great heritage of ways to deal with these kind of things. And so let's marry those two together, right? Let's bring back simple things like fasting, which is ascribed to basically all Christian men throughout history, sometimes throughout the entire year on Wednesdays and Fridays, sometimes, more focused on seasons like Lent or Advent. And as a pastor in his early 30s, when I first discovered this stuff, I had never done that. I had done something dumb like no chocolate for Lent or what high school or something, but I had never actually even just done a normal fast. And Jesus is like, well, when you fast, oh, you're having problems with these demons, disciples? Well, this one only comes up by prayer and fasting, the Didache and everything they say about fasting. And, we can get into more of that later, but, it's saying, okay, let's use these practices. Let's create a formula that's very easy for men to follow. And also let's have a 365-day devotional and marry all these things together so that men on a regular basis can be spoken to by pastors and leaders in the Lutheran Church with simple devotions. We can create a fraternity structure that's easy for men that don't necessarily have a strong network that they can lean into with weekly meetings. And then also lean into the church here and say, yeah, let's do some hard things for Lent. Let's feast appropriately during the season of Easter. Let's deal spiritual warfare during St. Michael's Lent, and then in each season of the year has its own flavor of how we kind of recapture this Christian masculinity.